Hello, my name is Seth Getz of NuVescor, and at NuVescor we do a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the manufacturing field and a variety of other fields as well. And what we like to do is we like to bring on a different person who is an expert in this field or different areas to be able to talk to them about the process and what is involved in the entire process. So today we have a great privilege. I've been looking forward to this for a while, Gord, and that is that we've got Gordon Bell here with us. And Gordon has one of the most fascinating resumes that you'll ever run into. He worked in the steel mills for a while and worked with the college. He joined a food services company, worked his way up, became the president of that, took that company public in one of the most successful IPOs that's ever been done. He has been CEO of a variety of companies, and right now he is the owner of the Midland Group. They do a great deal of advising of CEOs and management companies. And I could go for a while on the different things that you've done, Gord, but there's one thing I want to point out, and that is that you cannot spend time around Gord before you figure out one very important factor. And that is, while he advises CEOs and management teams about every area of business, and trust me, he does know everything, to the marketing, to management, every area of the business he is very versed in. But Gordon is a person who cares about the people involved. So while he advises companies about businesses, he cares about the people that are in those businesses. And so, Gordon, it's great to have you on here. I'm loving talking to you about this.
Thank you. Thank you.
So let me start out with a question. And this goes back to the idea of we're looking for the best interest of the business owners. Because when you're talking about the transitioning out of a business and this exit strategies, there are so many different ways of doing it. And when you talk to one person, they say, oh, this is the best way, or this is the best way. There's all different people who say they have the best way. But because you are always looking out for the best interest of the business owner, talk to me about that thought process, because you know the different ways of exiting because you've been there and done that. Talk to me about how you think through the process of what is the best option here for these for the business owner.
Yeah. I'll probably bounce around a little bit, but first of all, very blessed with having some of the greatest mentors really in America at a very young age. And I didn't know that I had those mentors until I looked back in the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Not just mentors in business, but I'm kind of holistic in my approach to life, where my first priority is loving God and loving others with no expectation in return. And, you know, when I was younger, there was always an expectation. Like, if I help you, will you help me? And through time and through going through the mountains and valleys, I've learned that serving is the number one. Now, what am I serving? I'm serving a God that has given people capital. And in doing that, it's in First Chronicles. You're to be good stewards. And what happens is each one of us has something to manage. Might be a family, a not-for-profit, a business. And so you have it for a moment in time. And so what we've been taught, and I've learned, is how do you improve value over time? And how do you have your company or business or anything prepared to sell or transfer and to make it attractive? What does that do? That says you've been a good steward of what you've got, and you're going to pass it on, and you're going to be rewarded with something. There's also risk involved. We live in a very difficult time. And if you study Ecclesiastes, and particularly back in Ecclesiastes 11, talk about all the different perils that can happen along the way. And so building value and de-risking are the two main elements. And I'm constantly looking at those aspects.
I love what you have to say about the fact that you are a steward for a period of time of something that is an amazing asset. And that is an amazing way to look at business, is because it's not always about you. It's
No,
about this, you are a steward of something that is bigger
steward.
than you.
And the assets I'm speaking of are mostly our people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had a chance to work in multi-billion-dollar companies and a 3-person tool and die shop. It just doesn't matter because we all are people with a plan, and we have numbers, and we're trying to grow. And those 4 steps I was taught by the retired chairman of First Boston, one of the top investment banking firms. I was taught that by my coaches in private equity. And it's kind of a constant theme of have the best people, best plan, best numbers, or repeatable, sustainable, and growth. And that is the underlying way to prepare your company and be attractive. Very young age, I had a chance to become a product manager. And lo and behold, within less than 10 years, I was chairman of the board of that company. It was a company doing about $1 million a month when I started. And I remember when we had our first $1 million month, it was kind of like unbelievable. And I remember having our $5 million month, years later, and I'm going, boy, is this different? We had X number of people, and then we had 400 people, and knocked out walls and built buildings, and we were making $500,000. I remember the first year, and then we made 10 million, and that 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow, how'd that happen? But it all had to do with building a team, building a plan. And then along the way, we got investors to help us because we couldn't do it alone. And they gave us a piece of the rock. And so that was called a management buyout that we performed. So that was one of the first things I learned about the transfer of wealth. The company was Alcoa, a very large aluminum company in America, wanted to sell off one of its businesses. And I happened to be an executive buried in there. And we performed what is called an MBO in those days, or LBO, leverage buyout. So that's a technique of a management team buying something from somebody else. Could have bought it from a family, could have bought it from a partnership, but management buyout is a very distinct technique. We also did that with private equity. So we had private equity partners and management in concert. And so that is a technique of transfer of wealth. Years later, the management team had performed well. The board of directors said, let's transfer the wealth to another concept. And they said, we ought to consider an ESOP. How about considering an IPO, initial public offering? And we didn't know what all those things really meant. So we studied how do we transfer our stock to the employees? Yes, no. Do we do all of it or part of it? Should it be leveraged or non-leveraged? So there's 4 different techniques when you do an ESOP. Then we'll
Can you briefly explain ESOP very briefly?
ESOP is an employee stock ownership plan whereby ownership would sell stock and each employee would have its own little group of stock. And so by the time they retire, they would have a nice little nest egg for retirement. They might also have a 401k. They might also have their personal savings from what they've done. Last year, I had a chance to sell an ESOP to a consolidator, and the wonderful people all got very handsome checks from counter people that worked in an automotive parts place to the management team. It was just so delightful to see that technique. So that was my first foray, doing a management buyout. It ended up in a public offering. Years later, that public company got bought by another public company. So that's another transfer technique. And so I had that experience in my 30s. I've had a few more experiences since then, and I'm now in my 70s. So I've had done over 100 different forms of sale or buy in that process. So I'm going to let you ask another question.
So with that, as business owners looking at this thing, because first of all, you kind of had this suggested, hey, what if you do a leverage buyout? And so you dug into that one and figured that one out. Then along they came and said, hey, what about a initial public offering or a employee ownership? And so you kind of had to do some digging into each of those as you went. But as you look at it now, when you talk about a business owner of a manufacturing or another type of company out there, how should they be thinking about it? And initially, they can do some of the research into some of those options or ask some questions about it. But how do they think about it? And when do they start doing that research?
Well, here's the basic thing. We call it the 3 legs of the stool. This comes from a wonderful organization called the Exit Planning Institute, which was formed about 15, 16 years ago. I happened to be a graduate of 14 years ago. And they really put everything in a nice checklist, but then you had to go practice it. Well, I had the advantage. I was one of the few CEOs that had done a lot of business and a lot of transfer of wealth prior to that. So I not only studied it, I had a chance to reflect on the things that had been done for others. And so we put all that in a nice checklist and learned how to do that. But there are 7 recognized ways to exit a business. But before you're doing that, you want to know the personal, financial, and business goals of the stakeholders. It might not just be shareholders. It might be some senior leadership people. It might be people that have been there forever. And they all have a stake in what happens when you transfer ownership. So understanding that is the first most important step. The way I get at that is I ask 3 simple questions, which leads to many questions, but I'll say, Seth, do you have a vision for your life and business? Wait a minute, Gord. We're talking about the business. I said, no, we're talking about your life. Oh, by the way, you happen to have an asset. We'll call that an illiquid asset. And until it's quantified, it's not been transferred to another person. Oh, life and a business. Yes. And then I say, where are you in the journey to accomplish your life and business goals? Start making notes. Then the one that kind of catches them by surprise, I say, what mission do you have in your life to fulfill? They go, Gord, that's pretty deep. I say, now let me make it easy. You still have fire in the belly to do this. Oh, I get that. Yeah, I got fire in the belly. Because you know what? There may be a day you don't have fire in the belly. You might get disabled. You might get divorced. You might die. Or you've got other people that say, I think I want to do this. You say, I don't want to do it anymore. Or a lot of our customers or the economic conditions of America may say, we're going to take all your business away. Gee, was there something called COVID a few years ago? One of my wonderful clients had a 67% growth during COVID because they had a product that was needed. I had another client that their business went to almost zero because they couldn't perform the wonderful manufacturing tasks that they were performing because people were not allowed to attend trade shows. So I've seen the ups and downs.
Yes.
Now, after you've done that 3-leg of the stool, and then you've done your succession planning, because guess what? You're not going to live forever. Death, disability, divorce, disruption. Whoops, I don't want to do it anymore. Then you say, well, I need to know what my business is worth, because if I want to improve it, I need a benchmark or a metric. So you come up with a valuation. And I use real simple techniques. I just say, let's take the trailing 12 months, give it a multiplier minus the debt. We have a proxy for value. I don't get all fancy with 10 and $13,000 and $5,000 studies unless they're needed.
Right.
We have a little benchmark. And then the most important thing happens after that. We get the team around the table and we perform an analytical SWOT analysis. What are your true strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? Get around a table, and there's about 60 of these that you analyze. Amazing. And again, this came from the Exit Planning Institute, a wonderful tool. And everybody says, oh, yeah, we got to do this, 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 and this, and this. No. We can only do 3, maybe 5 strategies at one time. We maybe only do about 8 or 10 tactics and staying focused. And I'm an advocate of doing 90-day plans, 1-year plans, 3-year plans, 10-year visions. And there's programs out there that follow that called EOS traction and just some wonderful different management tools keep you on track. And accountability, because you want to have accountability. So along the way, you say, okay, now I got a plan and I'm working the plan. Gosh, if I had to exit, I should have maybe a little chart that says, how can I exit? Well, I tell people you can exit on day 1. You can set up a charitable trust and start taking some of that wealth and putting it elsewhere. Oh, you could share your wealth with your management team or your employees. Oh, you can do that on day 1. You don't have to wait till the end. Oh, you can say, I want to attract another executive, and I'll use equity to do that until you have a partner. A lot of wonderful things you can do right away. So the term exit, it's like selling death insurance. Do you want some death insurance today? No, I want some life insurance. Well, why do you want that? Well, in case I die. Well, I like to talk about this as the legacy of this company.
Yes.
Not just exiting. We are transferring that wonderful capital that God gave us to others. Oh, by the way, we get down the journey and you want to give more or less to those different factions. Then you come along and you say, gosh, I want all the employees to have stock. Well, we can do that employee stock ownership plan concept. Or if you really are feeling your oats and you're really a big company, hundreds of millions, you say, I wonder what one of those public companies would look like. Well, I was blessed, very blessed in the 1980s to have the greatest mentors in private equity that, looking back, I had William E. Simon, ex-Secretary of Treasury under Nixon. I had Ray Chambers. I had Frank Walsh, Julius Koppelman, the executive vice president, the Sarnoff at RCA. I had the geniuses of private equity. And here I am in my 30s saying, teach me. And these men surrounded me with caring, accountability, but also knowledge. And we studied all these different options. And then we say, we want to grow the company faster. Well, then let's do merger acquisition. Well, why would you go out and buy something? Well, you may have an opportunity or a weakness or a threat, and an acquisition will take care of it.
Yes.
Oh, that's why you do M&A, not just for the purpose of buying. Well, if I'm a manufacturer, I could engineer a solution. Yeah. I could get a patent on it. Yeah. You got a trademark on it for marketing. Look at all these wonderful tools you have available to you to build shareholder value that's sustainable, repeatable. And I ended up along the way with 9 patents. And it wasn't because I was a genius patent guy. It's just went out and listened to customers and they had problems. We came up with solutions. By golly. And then some other guys had better ideas and we'll buy their patents. We bought about 40.
Being an entrepreneur and a business owner.
We bought about 43 patents from one guy. So it's a matter of understanding what your business plan is, what your strengths and weaknesses are, and opportunities and threats, and how you build and grow, and how you build a team, and how you build a plan, and repeatable, sustainable P&Ls, repeatable, sustainable reinvestment, and have a list of growth options that you cannot finish. And the emphasis is on cannot finish. Lord, why would you do that? Guess what? when you have a chance to transfer the wealth at the end, you're going to give some other wonderful team a chance to do those options
Mm-hmm.
and take that company to a new level. Isn't that great? You're taking God's capital and you keep on multiplying that baby.
Yep.
And that
So,
is what I learned, how to do that.
so
And the
if,
pros and cons of each one of those.
yep. So if I'm hearing you correctly, then as you look at it, you go back to, first of all, the person. What are you trying to accomplish? What are
Vision,
your
your
dreams,
vision.
aspirations, goals, vision that you have, that you say, this is what I need, I must accomplish in my lifetime? And
Yep.
that can be accomplished sometimes through the business, which is we do a lot of things through the business, but sometimes you need to accomplish things that are beyond the business. And so sometimes you look at it and say, okay, now is the time for me to pass on this stewardship of this company on to somebody else. And so you go through, at that point in time, you go through this SWOT analysis of saying, okay, let's see what we have in this asset of this business, with this team that we've got, with the way we're doing things here. What do we have that we have opportunities to do that can be amazing and that we can accomplish something? And looking at that, you come up from there and say, okay, based on those things, this is what we as a team need to do, but also it comes back to, this is some of the plans that we should be thinking about long-term in the business to be able to transfer this business on, because the business still has room to grow. It's kind of like your son or daughter, you've had a time with them to raise them, and you've done so much, but it's time sometimes to let them go out into the world and grow bigger than when they were your child in your home.
Yeah.
So you've got this opportunity there. So looking at it, you turn this around and said, it's not an exit, because an exit is kind of like a bit of a negative thing.
An end game.
Massively, right.
It's over with.
Right. And so now you look at it and say, this is the opportunity both for me to fulfill the rest of my mission, my values, but also to let this business go beyond where I'm taking it right now. And so you look at that and say, how can I make that happen? So that's kind of starting, if I'm hearing you right, that's the starting process of thinking about it. And then as you go into it, you look at, okay, here is all my options available to me.
Yeah. And as a company grows and becomes larger, more profitable, you end up with more options because you've got more people and more people that can be involved in the sharing of the wealth. Now, and it may not even be just the equity of the company. It might be some very specialized bonus plans, incentive plans. I've got one client where they have the original shareholder group from 1905, all the generational transfer. There's about 75 family groups still owning the company. So they have equity. The senior leadership team or the management team has another form of equity so that they're encouraged to build and grow. And so when they get to their just reward, they've got a little nest egg to say, you know, I wasn't part of the family, but I was part of the management team. And then the employees all are in a profit share plan on top of their 401k. And so what a wonderful form.
That is amazing.
Honoring the various constituencies in the company. Because somebody, you know, let's say working in the factory in the third shift, 18 years old, they don't have money to say, can I buy some stock from that original family? But they get honored in a different way.
I live in Holland, Michigan, and there's this company that started in Holland, Michigan, and became a very large company. It's called Prince Corporation. They worked in the automotive industry, and it was fascinating because eventually, as the owners said, now is the time for us to move out, they were bought out by a large company for a massive amount of money, making them very wealthy. But what was fascinating about it is that they took, and after the transaction was done, in other words, they had sold their business, the employees were no longer their employees, they weren't trying to keep them around. They went and they had a formula for how they would, and they gave us check to every single employee of that company that they had just sold. And those checks were based on, you know, their salary and how many years they had been there. And so they were getting checks for, $500,000 to $5-10 million. These were very significant, life-changing amounts of money that they gave them. And I look back at in our town here that we've got so many small businesses started as a result of that transaction. So many people started.
That transaction, I happen to have knowledge of.
Mhm.
John Spoolhoff is a friend.
Mhm.
John was a young guy that met Mr. Prince. And there's a long story of how that happened. And I was blessed with an opportunity, about 25 years ago, to meet John.
Mhm.
And he sat down with me and he said, Gord, this is what God gave us. And it came to a point where it was time to transfer this business. And he gave me his business plan of how he treated his people, what was his growth plan, shared the financials with me. And so I had a chance to be mentored from that man with the
Mhm.
God-given talents that he had, along with Prince and all the wonderful executives. But there's
Yeah.
so many stories in our great country of how that's happened.
Yeah.
And so,
Well,
yeah,
Gord, thank you so much. I mean, it's been great. It's good to talk to you about. You really brought a good perspective around this idea of being a steward of a business, of an asset, of a team, and being the best steward possible, and making sure that you can accomplish some of your goals, making sure that they, as
sure.
stakeholders, accomplish some of their goals. That
Yeah.
is a really good perspective. And sometime we're going to do it. We're going to have to do this again because I want to dig a little deeper into some of those stories.